It is not always loud. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it comes out as raised voice, slammed door, the specific sharpness of a tone that the people around you have learned to recognize before you do. But often it is quieter than that. It is the irritability that sits just below the surface on an ordinary day. The shortness with the people who matter most that you cannot fully explain after the fact. The low-grade tension that lives in your chest and shoulders like something waiting. The way small things hit harder than they should. The way traffic or a slow computer or a comment that was not even directed at you can produce a response in your body that is disproportionate to what just happened by a significant margin. And then it passes, or you contain it, or it comes out sideways onto something that had nothing to do with where it actually came from, and you move on. But it is always there, not always at the surface, but always underneath it. The hum, the readiness, the thing that people close to you have noticed and named, and that you have explained more than once as stress or tiredness or just the way I am. Except that the stress explanation does not fully account for it, because it was there before the stress, and it is still there when the stress resolves. And the tiredness is real, but it is not the cause. The tiredness might even be caused by the anger, by the continuous work of containing it, managing it, not letting it out in the wrong direction at the wrong moment. This is the psychology of the man who is always angry, but does not know why. And it is one of the most misunderstood patterns in men's emotional lives. Misunderstood by the people around him who experience the anger as something personal, as something about them, and misunderstood by the man himself who experiences it as a reasonable response to external provocation rather than as a symptom of entirely internal, something that has been building for a long time, in a place that the anger itself is specifically designed for him to look in. In the emotional vocabulary that most men are given, anger occupies a unique position. It is the one emotion that is consistently socially acceptable for men to express. Sadness is weakness, fear is shameful, grief is uncomfortable for everyone around you, loneliness is embarrassing, hurt is something you do not show. But anger is different. Anger looks like strength. Anger is an assertion. Anger is, at least in the short term, a position of power rather than vulnerability. And so for men who have learned to suppress the full range of their emotional experience, anger becomes the default output for everything that cannot be expressed any other way. Psychologists call this emotional masking or secondary emotion. The anger is real. The physical experience of it is entirely genuine, but it is not the primary emotion. It is the emotion that sits on top of the primary emotion and makes it safe to feel. The man who has lost something and cannot allow himself to grieve it becomes angry at circumstances. The man who is afraid and cannot allow himself to be afraid becomes angry at the thing that is frightening him. The man who is hurt and cannot allow himself to be hurt becomes angry at the person who hurt him. The anger is not a lie. It is a translation of something that felt too dangerous to express in its original language into the one emotion that felt safe enough to show. This is why the anger so often seems disproportionate, because the anger is not just responding to what just happened. It is responding to what just happened, plus everything it reminded him of that he has been carrying without expression for weeks or months or years. The slow computer is not the problem. The slow computer is the thing that tripped the wire on something much older and much heavier that has been waiting for a place to go. And the computer gets the full weight of everything that has been accumulating, because the computer is a safe target, because the computer cannot be hurt. because expressing the full weight of something at the actual source of it would require a kind of honesty that the man has not yet found his way to. Male anger is almost always grief wearing armor. It is the feeling underneath, the loss, the fear, the loneliness, the hurt, wearing the only suit of clothes that the man was given permission to put on. Understanding this does not make the anger wrong, it makes it comprehensible, and what is comprehensible can be worked with. What is incomprehensible just keeps happening. The accumulation starts early. A boy who is told consistently that certain emotional responses are not acceptable does not stop having those responses. He stops showing them. He learns to suppress them before they reach the surface. And suppression takes energy. It takes the energy that would have gone into expressing and processing the emotion and redirects it into containment. And containment, sustained over years, over decades, produces pressure, not metaphorically, physiologically. The body that has been containing unexpressed emotional material for a long time is carrying that material somewhere, and the place it most often goes is the place that feels most like a valve, the anger. Which is why the anger, when it comes out, often does not match the situation that triggered it, because the situation that triggered it was just the moment when the pressure found an opening. There are also specific sources that many angry men carry without having examined them. A father whose anger modeled that this was how men handled difficulty. A childhood in which the environment was unpredictable in ways that required constant vigilance, and whose legacy is a nervous system that is perpetually braced for something. A series of experiences in relationships, in work, in the fundamental unfairness of specific things that happened that were never fully processed, that were absorbed and managed and moved past without the processing that would have allowed them to actually be finished. They are not finished, they are just stored, and they contribute quietly and continuously to the pressure that the anger occasionally releases. Underneath almost every chronically angry man is a man who is, at the level he cannot show, significantly more vulnerable than the anger suggests. The anger is not random, it is protective. It is the emotional system doing its job of keeping the most exposed parts of a man's experience defended from contact, and the things it is most commonly defending are these. Grief that was never allowed to land. Men lose things, relationships, versions of themselves, people they loved, opportunities that closed, lives they did not get to live, and are rarely given the space or permission to grieve those losses in the full, messy, extended way that grief requires. And so the grief gets converted, gets stored, gets pressed down under a layer of function and forward movement, and gets expressed eventually as irritability at small things that are not the real problem. Fear that cannot be named. The man who is afraid of failing, afraid of being exposed as insufficient, afraid of losing what he has built, afraid of his own mortality or irrelevance. That fear cannot be shown directly without threatening the identity, and so it becomes anger. The fear of failure becomes anger at circumstances that seem to be making him fail. The fear of exposure becomes aggression because aggression feels like control, and control is what the fear is asking for.
Loneliness and longing that have no acceptable outlet. Many chronically angry men are also chronically lonely in the way we have described in previous episodes, carrying a hunger for genuine connection that the performance of their lives has made difficult to satisfy. And that longing, pressed down and unacknowledged, accumulates and comes out as irritability, as disconnection, as the specific anger of a man who is surrounded by people and has nobody to fully tell what is actually going on with him. The anger is not the enemy. The anger is the messenger. The problem is that the messenger has been so consistently misread by the man himself and by everyone around him that the message has never been received. And an undelivered message does not go away. It just keeps trying to be sent. Think about the last time you were significantly angry. Not mildly irritated, genuinely angry, the kind that produced a physical response. And now go one layer underneath it, not to justify the anger or analyze the situation that triggered it, to what was underneath it. What was the feeling under the anger? Not the story, the feeling. Was there hurt there? Was there fear? Was there a sense of loss or powerlessness, or something that felt deeply unfair in a way that connected to something older than the incident itself? Think about what you are carrying right now that has not been expressed. Not the manageable things, the things that are genuinely heavy, the grief that has not been fully felt, the fear that has not been named, the loneliness that has not been admitted, the things that have been pressed down under function and forward movement because there was no time or no permission or no person in your life you trusted enough to say them to. How long have they been there? What would it cost you to say them out loud, not to everyone, to one person, in one honest sentence? And ask the most uncomfortable question: who receives the anger? Not who caused it, who receives it? Is it the people closest to you, the ones who are safest to be angry at because they're not going to leave, or because they are too important to be honest with in the other direction? Or because home is the only place where the containment breaks? Because if the people who love you most are consistently receiving the pressure that built up everywhere else, then the anger is not just a personal problem, it is a relational one. And the relationship is absorbing the cost of something that the relationship did not cause. The first step is not anger management in the conventional sense. The first step is curiosity, the practice of pausing, not always in the moment, sometimes after the moment, and asking what was underneath that. Not to excuse the anger, to understand it. Because anger that is understood loses its automatic quality. When you know that the frustration at the slow computer is really the frustration of carrying 3 months of unprocessed pressure, and the computer was just the thing that gave it an opening, that knowledge creates a gap between the trigger and the response. And in that gap, for the first time, there is a choice about where to take what you are actually feeling. The second step is developing a vocabulary for the emotions underneath. This sounds simple and is genuinely hard for men who have spent decades operating with a single output for a wide range of inputs. Learning to name the specific feeling, not just anger, but the specific hurt or fear or grief or longing underneath, requires practice, not performance of those feelings, just naming them to yourself first, in private. Just the practice of saying, I am not angry right now, I am frightened. I am not irritable right now, I am grieving something. I am not impatient right now, I am lonely in a way that I have not acknowledged. The naming does not resolve the feeling, but it reroutes it away from the automatic anger pathway and towards something that can actually be processed. The third step is finding somewhere for the real emotions to go. Not a dramatic outlet, a real one. A person, a partner, a friend, a therapist, another man who is honest enough to have this kind of conversation, to whom you can say what is actually happening. Not the managed version, the real one. The fear, the grief, the loneliness, the thing that has been building, not as a crisis, as a conversation, as the specific relief of a man who has been carrying something alone and has finally found another person's hands to help with the weight. The anger does not disappear when you do this work, but it changes. It becomes less automatic, less disproportionate, less directed at the wrong targets. The people around you stop receiving the accumulated pressure of everything that could not be expressed anywhere else, and you stop living in the specific exhaustion
of a man who is always on the edge of something he cannot name. The anger becomes information instead of weather, a signal instead of a storm. And the man who can read his own signals, who knows what the anger is telling him and can follow the message to its actual source, that man is not less strong than the one who simply contains everything. He is the only one who is actually in control of what the anger does with him. Next episode, the man who cannot commit, who gets close to the line in relationships, in career, in life choices, and pulls back at the last moment, who wants what commitment would give him and cannot take the step that would provide it. That specific pattern, where it comes from, what it's protecting, and what becomes possible when a man finally chooses to step fully into his own life. That one is next.